morning. Warm welcome to everybody who...
Good morning, everybody, and it is lovely to see so many of you here this morning. I'm slightly nervous. I feel a little bit like that swan. You know, on the surface I may appear quite calm and collected. Underneath my legs are going like Belial. This morning, what I would like to cover with you is I'm going to give you a little bit of a taster as to what Chip Plus does. I'm going to go through the education additional support for learning legislation as well. I'm going to go through some information on child's plans because they can be a bit difficult to sort of get your head round sometimes, and I've got some other information which is placed on the tables in front of you. As Alison said, I am Karen Kelbie and I'm an Information Support Officer with Chip Plus, which stands for Children in the Highlands Information Point. I have worked for Chip now for 10 years, just had my anniversary of being there 10 years in January, and I've seen quite a lot of changes in that time with Chip Plus. What I would say to you is that when I first started with Chip Plus, giving out a library book was actually quite a common thing, or a piece of information on a particular condition. Now I would say, if you could go to the next slide, that's how a majority of mums and dads come to us, and parents and carers, right? It very much is that there's a lot of change happened in that time, and a lot of parents and carers are coming to us where they're just tearing their hair out, they've got to crisis point or past crisis point, and they just don't know where to turn. So we do spend a lot of time on the phone and with parents just going through that and trying to unpick that. But Chip Plus we're an independent charity. We are funded by the Highland Council and the NHS, but we've been going since 1993. So it'll be 26 years this year. Started off on a part-time basis in Drummond School, giving out information mostly on support groups, funding and conditions for children. That's changed quite a lot, and we were commissioned by the Highland Council to advise on the additional support for learning legislation back in 2005, and have been doing that since then. The Scottish Government fund Inquire, and Inquire have an amazing amount of leaflets and information on their website as well, especially sort of tailored to more specific questions that you may well have. And also, as well as we've got the NAS Education Service too. But as I say, the Scottish Government fund Inquire to provide for the whole of Scotland, but because Highland is quite diverse and its rurality, it's quite different than some of the more central areas, the Highland Council decided that they wanted to actually get that service provided by an independent charity in the local area who understood the needs and the geographical area of Highlands, because it is quite different. It is quite different. We're an information and advice service for families and young people all from 0 to 19, so we can get involved before birth. So we cover all additional support needs. It's not just condition specific, and it doesn't have to be a diagnosed condition that we would have that conversation with you. So if it's a case of that the child has actually just got, you know, is displaying behavioural difficulties in nursery or in school, then we will talk to you then as well and give you information on that. We cover the whole of the Highland Council area, and we've got an office here. And we've also got an office at the Burney Centre as well, which is where we've been for most of the time. And we can provide support all over. You know, we can provide it over the phone, we can provide it face-to-face, and we can provide it just with email. It really depends on, one, where the person is, but two, what that person wants. That person might not actually be ready just to meet somebody face-to-face just yet, but there are a lot of parents and carers who like to meet meet us face-to-face. So who are the lovely people you might meet? This is it. This is us. So the first picture's of Sarah. She's our Chief Officer. So she runs the show, as it were. Karen McKnight is the lovely lady who usually answers the phone. You usually have to say which Karen is that you'd like to speak to, because there's the two of us. It gets a bit confusing. Then there's myself, and then there's Catherine as well, and we're the information support officers. I'm the only full-time member of staff, but Catherine's more or less full-time. She's in every single day till 4 o'clock, usually past that, to be very fair. So it's just ourselves, myself and Catherine, that tend to advise on the education additional support for learning legislation that we're going to cover today. The next page, this shows you where you will find the information on the ESL legislation on our page, and we've also got the resources page as well as a good page to have a look at, because there's lots of different things like frazzled threads been added, which was written by Rachel Geddes, and also as well as there's a link to the Managing Change to Reduce Anxiety presentation too. So, now we're going to go to the dry bit, I'm afraid. I will try and make it as interesting as I possibly can. We're going to go on and we're actually going to discuss the Education Additional Support for Learning Act 2004 and as amended 2009. And this here actually is the legal definition of additional support needs. Additional support needs, a child or young person has additional support needs for the purpose of the Act where, or for whatever reason, a child or young person is or is likely to be unable, without the provision of additional support, to benefit from school education provided or to be provided for the child or young person. Lots of words. Basically, a child who is not able to gain the most from their education would be deemed to have additional support needs. And that can be, additional support needs can be things that maybe only last for 6 months, where maybe the piece of work that needs to be done, if there's been a bereavement in the family, which will be longer than 6 months, but a bereavement in a family where the child's not really coping, then they would be deemed to have additional support needs because they're not coping with life in general, they're not coping with school. It could be a case of that it's actually a relative that's actually stayed in the house with them. So, you know, it's very much there every single day. So that is the legal definition for the purpose of the actual Act itself. And the Act itself, what does it mean? The Act aims to ensure that all children and young people are provided with the necessary support to help them work towards achieving their potential. And that's not the potential of what the school think or we think, it's the potential that they can actually achieve with the right support put in place. As I say, the term additional support needs applies to children and young people for whatever reason, short or long term, that they can make in order for them to make the most from their education. And the Act doesn't just cover education. It does place a legal obligation on the other agencies that could be involved with your child or young person who has additional support needs. And the Highland Council do have those other agencies there who are there to help. The 2004 Act was brought in 2005 and it was introduced to support those children and to ensure that they actually had that support put in place as well. The next slide is the Highland Practice Model, which some people will sort of know as GIRFIC, and I'm just going to let you to be able to actually have a read through that. We were the forerunner for GIRFIC at the time, and it came out around about 2009 because it came in just after I sort of started. And to be very fair, a lot of people would probably say that GIRFIC really is just good working practice at the end of the day. But it does obviously cover the fact that we want the curriculum for excellence. It does actually sort of mirror image the fact that we want confident individuals, effective contributors, successful learners, responsible citizens. But that also needs to be, it needs to be the child at the centre of that. And this is what I would like to point out straight away. This Act is meant to be about the child being at the centre and what the child's needs are. and everything else that goes on, you know, and that child is part of, including their family, including school, including their community. So what does the Act mean? The Act means that the Highland Council have a duty to determine additional support needs and to assess that child and to ensure that those supports go in place. What I would say to you here at this point is that I'm going to tell you what the legislation says, and I'm going to tell you what the legal obligations are. But I'm also going to be open and honest with you and say to you that we all know, and I'm not making excuses here, we all know the financial implications that are placed on the Highland Council at the moment. And what I would say is we need to be realistic about what we're looking for, and we're more than happy to help you to get that. But there are certain things that you know that you may have in reports that will say that a child needs one-to-one for at least 4 hours a day. You know, we all know that actually technically that's not necessarily going to happen. But if we can get 2 hours a day where that child is feeling more supported and it is supporting that child's emotional well-being as well, then we can look at that, but we have to be realistic as well. Okay. The assessment process, obviously you can ask for an assessment for your child to take place. And I'm going to talk a bit about the staged approach as well, which is on page 9. I'm going to let you know how that assessment request should be put and how to do that. What we would say is that any request for an assessment I would always recommend, and I know that Ian Nisbet from Karen Legal would always recommend and tell you that you need to do that in writing. Sometimes you can have a conversation. It depends on the relationship that you actually have with your school, because there are schools out there where you can ask for that request and it will be done. There are other schools that will forget that conversation ever happened. So what I would say to you is, even if you have a really good relationship with your school, you can always follow it up with an email afterwards and just say, thanks very much for the discussion today. I know that I asked for X, Y and Z. I'm just confirming that's still okay to do that. And then that means that you've got a bit of a paper trail on people coming back to you. It's very important, and the Act does cover the views of the child and the views of the parent. Gerfec and Shinari are actually part of the Child and Young Persons Act 2016, where some of that is adopted. The names person legislation isn't really adopted just at the moment, but that's a different talk altogether. So, we talk about in the legislation as well about the types of plans and things like that. In the legislation, the only legal document that you actually have is a CSP, a Coordinated Support Plan. And there's quite a bit of information in your guides there that actually goes through the process of how to request a CSP, what exactly a CSP means, the actual process of it all, the timescales and things like that are in your pack. But there are a number of other plans that we talk about as well in Highland here. So we have the Form 1, which I have on the presentation that you can see. The child's plan we'll obviously go through. There's a few copies on everybody's desks of the IEP, the Individualised Education Plan. There's the CSP, the Coordinated Support Plan. There are intimate care plans. There are positive relationship plans, which are really more to do with behaviour protocols and things like that. It's just a nicer way of putting it. But there are also health plans as well that are part and parcel of that. So if a child has diabetes, epilepsy, unfortunately end-of-life plans, asthma, number of other conditions, health conditions that can be allergies. If you've got a nut allergy or whatever, then there's those plans included in that as well. So what are your rights, the rights within the, who have the rights within the actual additional support for learning legislation? Well, children up to 12, even though, and I do have a copy of these, even though the children up to the age of 12 actually have rights through the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, and there are some copies here that you can have. But what I would say to you is that children under 12, it tends to very much be, it's the parent that takes that forward. The parent takes what the views of that child are forward within those plans and within the legislation. Can you... rights of young children and young people 12 to 15, well, I'm going to leave that one entirely up to Catherine because she's going to cover that with you this morning. Parents and young children 16 plus, so the rights of the children and young people and parents 16 plus. So there are a number of rights within the legislation. You've got the right to request an assessment of that child's, young person's additional support needs, request to the additional support needs manager to find out whether their child or young person have additional support needs requiring a coordinated support plan. And children and young people with additional support needs covers looked after children as well, and also it will cover young carers too. Which there are a number of children in Highland. You can request a specific assessment or examination, but also as well as you have the right to the independent third-party services in mediation, dispute resolution, additional support needs tribunals, and a Section 70 reference as well. You have the rights to make a placing request for your child to an independent school, and you must be informed of the outcome of those requests and the reason why your request may possibly be refused. Children under 12, do have the right to have their views listened to and recorded. And that's one of the things I will come on to when I am discussing the child's plan and how the child's plan process actually works here in Highland as well. We also, as well as that there is the duties of other agencies, so that the Highland Council and the other agencies, because obviously the other agencies including physiotherapist, speech and language therapist, dietitian, occupational therapist, while they are within children's services within Highland, actually they were always governed by the NHS previously, so they are still seen as a separate service. So the rights are that they would have to come back with a really, really good reason as to why they're not going to do the assessment. But you have to be informed of what that outcome actually is. Your rights to request a coordinated support plan, and I'll go a little bit more into that as we go through the presentation as well, because obviously there are certain criteria that your child has to tick, as it were, to be eligible for a coordinated support plan. But unfortunately, there's always one box at the end that most children fall down on, unfortunately, which means that they would not be considered for a coordinated support plan. There is also, as well as legal obligations with regards to transitions as well. And those transitions are not just the transitions out of education into adult services, they are the transitions between nursery and primary, they are also the transitions between primary and secondary. In fact, nursery to primary provision should always start 6 months before the child is due to go to primary school. There should be a transitions planning meeting, and it should be discussed as to looking at the child's plan, updating the child's plan or their coordinated support plan as to what supports that child actually needs to have put in place. Transitions from primary to secondary should start at least 12 months beforehand, so that the child, if they require quite an enhanced transition, if you've got a child that's got more complex needs, then that would mean that they probably would be visiting the secondary school a little bit more often, getting to build up relationships with other professionals in that school, just getting used to the actual school in itself, because some of them are like rabbit warrens. I've been to Milburn Academy, I don't know how many times in Parents' Night, and I am still trying to find my way around. My daughter comes with me every time, because there is no way I will find myself from maths to music to science to... no. So for me, if that's difficult for me, then it's going to be even more difficult for your young person there as well. Transitions out of education into adult services can start as early as 14, age 14. It really depends on the young person and when they actually they are wanting to leave school. Now, with some young people, it may well actually just be that conversation of, I'm staying on until 6th year. And that's all that needs to be recorded, is that the child intends to stay until 6th year. So actually, you may not actually need to have that full transition meeting till at least probably 2 years beforehand. So once they actually hit the end of 4th year, possibly 5th year. It really depends on the child themselves. Whereas if you've got a child who, for example, has got quite severe and complex health needs, you may well start that transitions process, and talking about that transitions process at 14 or 15, because you will be looking for an actual placement for them that requires to get lots of other services involved as well to ensure that that happens. So, with regards to working together, one of the things I would like to point out to everybody, and I've actually gone through and highlighted this in my actual pack. I will talk a little bit more about the coordinated support plan there. Working together to resolve disagreements, which is information sheet 10. At the very top of that sheet, I'm going to read it out to you, at the very top of that sheet, and I would say that within my role, this is probably one of the biggest things that parents struggle with. This is one of the things that if this was actually put in place and actually adhered to all the time, the majority of parents wouldn't feel as frustrated as they actually do. Clear and regular communication between parents, children, young people and those who work with them is essential to build good relationships. Good communication together with information and support to help avoid disagreements or prevent them from escalating into more serious disputes. It's essential. Just being able to talk to each other, actually talking through what's happening. It is essential. It doesn't cost any money. It's an email, it's a telephone call. You know, it's just being given that information. A lot of parents out there feel that I don't get told anything. I don't know what they're doing. They just keep, every single time I ask the question, they brush me off. Whereas and that makes you more frustrated and gets you to the stage where you feel angry. When actually, if they just turned around and said, actually, we're not doing that with Billy today or anymore because he really wasn't coping with it. And we've just come back from the Christmas holidays and he's really, really high just now. So we've stopped doing that piece of work with him just now until he's in more of a frame of mind to be able to cope with that. If you as a parent were told that, you go, all right, okay, that's great, thanks very much. Simple 2-minute conversation. Communication is key and working together is key. And I would always say that is probably one of the most difficult things for a lot of parents, is getting that communication to be continuous and then not to feel as though doors are closed as well. So, when working together, there are a number of steps to obviously first steps to resolving disagreements. And the first steps to resolving disagreements that I would say, and there's a slide on the next page for this, is just get in contact with that named person. Your named person within your school. If you're in nursery, it's going to be your health visitor. If you're in primary school, it's going to be the head teacher. If you're going to be in secondary school, it's going to be the guidance teacher or the deputy head, depending on the size of the secondary school. Just getting in contact with them and saying, look, things are not working just now. We need to have a little meeting or I need to have a discussion with you about it. Can we get together? Put that in writing. You've got a paper trail then. If they don't come back to you within about 10 days, get back in contact with them, is what I would say to you. What I would say to you is, as well, is when you're writing that email, tell them why. Not just that you want to have a meeting with them, because that doesn't really give them any information, but actually I want to have that meeting with you because things are not working for wee Johnny just now. And I want to make sure that he's getting the best. These are the reasons why, or these are the things that are going wrong. I would say to you as well, is put some strengths in there as well, because things that are working well always can give us an inroad into how we support a child or young person. It's not just the things that they're finding difficult can actually be helped by the things they're really good at. So I would put some strengths in there too, and that's part and parcel of the child's plan process. I would also, as well as ask for it, just say, can I meet with you? Can I have an email conversation? Can I have a phone call with you? It's entirely up to you. It's what fits best with your life. And just ask so that we can look to resolve this as well. And then that should hopefully be enough to just actually say, look, I want to talk to you. I want to try and resolve this for wee Johnny's sake. Not for anybody else's, for wee Johnny, so that wee Johnny comes home from school and doesn't put his fist through the bathroom door. Those sorts of things, or goes into meltdown as soon as they come in, or they need to come in and actually sit in a pop-up tent for an hour and a half to try and bring themselves down after that day at school. And a lot of the time, that's what a lot of parents find, and I'm sure there's quite a number of you in the room, your child can hold it together when they're at school, and they're fine. There's no problems at school. They seem fine. Actually, they're really not. That bubbling is going on in their stomach and in them. And when they come home, where they're safe, they're secure, they're loved, and they know that they're not going to be judged, they have a complete and utter meltdown. But there are things that could happen at school, actually, that would mean that when the child comes down, actually, that meltdown possibly only lasts, because they're going to find it difficult, but it only lasts 10 minutes instead of 2 hours. The build-up of those strategies being put in place at school actually means that within 6 weeks, actually, your child's coming home from school and might need that time out for half an hour, but actually they're then able to engage with everybody else in the house and go on and do other things. Mediation is there where you can request that through Bernadette Cairns, and her contact details are in the guide. Mediation is really... It's really about when that relationship completely breaks down and they bring in somebody completely independent to mediate between the Highland Council and yourself. What I would say to you is that, and I've had this conversation with Bernadette, that doesn't have to wait until that relationship has completely broken down. It can happen beforehand. Dispute resolution or independent adjudication, got that word wrong on the slide, but we'll change that. That is where you actually make a reference to the Scottish Government. And it requires quite a lot of information to be sent off with that. It used to be the case when I first started that where dispute resolution was concerned is actually you had to go to the Highland Council and request it. The Scottish Government felt that actually that wasn't working with any of the councils because there was a lot that weren't necessarily getting through. So they changed it where you actually go to the Scottish Government and then they then go back to the Highland Council and request their version of events as well. Additional support needs tribunals. Additional support needs tribunals are usually when your child is either being considered for a CSP, has a CSP, and it's not being adhered to, or you've had your CSP refused. And you can actually go to the additional support needs tribunals when your child is being considered for a CSP. You can go in between that process as well. And the contact details and some more information about that is in there. Let's Talk ASN, that is the advocacy service which is ran with the Govan Law Education Centre, and trying to think I think it might be Bernardo's. So you think I'd know all this by now, wouldn't you? There is another agency involved with the Education Law Unit with Govan Law with regards to the Let's Talk ASN service, and that's for parents to be able to use and young people over 16. We also, as well as obviously, we have the My Rights, My Say, which is your 12 to 15-year-old who have the advocacy service, and our Catherine is here, who covers quite a large area, I would say, just on her very own. But also, as well as that there is, with regards to resolving disagreements, there's a Section 70s. I don't know an awful lot about, and I'm going to be honest about it, I don't know an awful lot about Section 70s. We never really get involved. When Section 70s start coming on board, that's really when we signpost you to other organisations who will help you out with that. Thank you, Alice. So as I said, where do you start? You start by contacting that named person, requesting a meeting. And I would say as well is that before that meeting, what's great to be able to do is actually sit down and make a list of your concerns, make a list of your child's strengths. It's nice to be able to actually sit down and write what they're good at, because it can be a very, very negative experience when you're writing everything else down. And I think that's one of the things with the child's plan, actually looking at that child's strengths and being able to actually use those as strategies to help those pressures as well. But also as well as what exactly is it your child is struggling with? What are the pressures that are faced on your child at that time? Try and take somebody to support you. There's nothing more lonely than sitting behind that desk with 9 professionals around about you. First meeting I ever went to wasn't in the Inverness area. I walked into the room with the mum and there were 12 professionals sitting round, and I thought, oh my Lord. I felt pressure, I felt overwhelmed, and I thought, well, if I feel overwhelmed, how's the poor mum feeling? Or the poor dad feeling, or the poor granny feeling? It's very, very overwhelming going into this meeting. So I would always recommend, even if it's a family friend, your mum, your dad, your partner, your husband, your wife, make sure that you take somebody with you, because it's amazing when you're sitting on that side of the table. You can be the strongest person in the world, but sitting on that other side of the table, you then become a pot of jelly. And you cannot concentrate and you do not take anything in. So having that other person actually is great to be able to remind you of maybe something you haven't said. I've done that in meetings myself. Chip Plus will come and support you at a meeting. Don't all come towards me at once though, because myself and Catherine are only 2. But we can come to you, we can help you to prepare for those meetings. But actually having somebody else who can actually remind you you've missed something else, or come out and actually just discuss with you. What did they say about that again? What does that mean? It means then that other person, you both might have different ideas of what that actually meant as well. So, what I thought we would do is go on to the different plans that we have here in Highland, and some of the ones that you might actually be involved in, or might get told are in place for your child, and you're thinking, I haven't got a clue what that means. I haven't got a clue. And the first one is the Form 1. So a Form 1 is really for your children who, and I'll come on to that, about the ASN levels within the child's plan. But those are the children that maybe sit on a level 1 or a level 2 that possibly will have a Form 1. And that Form 1 is noted on CMIS, which is a platform that the schools actually use, and so it means that staff can actually see that. And that's for anybody. You know, that's a young carer who actually may well have a caring duty at home, where it might be to make sure that mum's up in the morning. What it depends, you know, no matter what her health need is to make sure that mum's up in the morning. But it really is put on there more so that the teachers and staff can actually see that actually that young person has a caring role, and actually they need to just have a little bit of TLC, and they actually just need to be given a little bit of leeway when it comes to homework, or they might end up turning up to class late because they're struggling to get mum up in the morning and there's no other carer coming in, for example. It could be that they have diabetes, and actually what we need to do is we need to make sure that they're drinking and that they're eating at regular times to make sure that they don't have a hypoturn. It could be something that actually provides direct support. to that young person as well. And a Form 1 is something that should be reviewed by the school every 1 to 2 months, depending on what that need actually is. But it's also as well as is that a child actually, it may well be a case of that, for example, if it's a bereavement of granny who stayed with them, they're not necessarily going to have that Form 1 forever. That child may learn to actually cope and move forward, so they don't require that any longer. But also, similarly, is if that child actually really isn't coping with the fact that granny's gone and we really are needing to put a little bit more intervention in place, is that could then change into an actual child's plan or a CSP for that child or young person. Child's plans are not a legal document. As I say, the only legal document you have within the legislation is the CSP, and requesting a CSP is done through the ESN manager, where you would say why you want your child to have a CSP and you want your child to be considered for that. They then have a certain length of time to come back to you to say that they have got your request and that they are going to look for those reports from people as to why that child needs a CSP, but also to set up a CSP toolkit meeting, which is where you determine whether or not the child has got additional support needs. Majority of people who are asking for a CSP for their child, the child has additional support needs, so that's one box that's going to be ticked. The box probably, because there's about 4 areas within that CSP toolkit that a child has to actually qualify for. The one box that most children will fall down on is the box that actually says whether or not that child has substantial support from another service which is not education. So that would mean that a physiotherapist or an occupational therapist or a speech and language therapist or a CSW, you've got social work input, would come and see that child on a weekly basis. And that is where a majority of children fall down. I have heard, lots of people saying if you've got a robust enough child's plan, you don't need a CSP. If you want a CSP for your child, you can still request one. So you have that right within that legislation to ask for a CSP. There are certain timescales. A CSP process from start to finish shouldn't really take any more than 26 weeks, which is a long time. 6 months is a long time. But the support should still be in place for your child or young person in that time as well. The Child's Plan, or what was originally known as the Universal Child's Plan, actually came about because we had health plans, we had social work plans, we had education IEP plans, and none of them talked to each other. None of them were on the same system. So actually, you didn't necessarily know what help a child was actually getting from a particular service. And it was originally called the Universal Child's Plan so that we could actually pool all of that together. And means then that we just had one plan. So everybody had a copy of that plan. They can be a bit of a minefield. And what I would say to you is within the slides, I have actually given you a copy of the new version of the Child's Plan, not the old version. And what I would say to you is with the new version, if your child at present has a Child's Plan and it's in the old version, when you go to renew your Child's Plan at some point this year, then they should go on to the new version of the Child's Plan. Okay. Within the Child's Plan as well is that on that very first page in section 1, it's all about your child, their name, their date of birth, what sex they are, what school they go to, who's their named person or lead professional. But I'd like to point out the bit at the top that talks about the draft and progress, the final plan, the multi-agency plan or the single agency plan. What I would say to you is that where that's concerned, every single plan at any meeting should be a draft in progress, because when you go for that meeting, is that you should actually have nothing signed off as yet. You should be making discussing what the child's strengths and pressures are. You should be discussing what the main issues are at that time, and what the action points are going to be before it ever becomes a final plan. And what I would say to you is that further through the slides, you'll see the part that actually asks for the parents' views and the child's views of the child's plan. It's only once you have had your copy, you have signed it off, put your comments in about what you feel about it, and sent that in the child's views, and sent that back, it's only then that it should become a final plan. Okay? And that shouldn't be given to you the week before your next child's plan. It should be timely. Okay? It should be timely. So if you have a meeting, say for example today, I would expect you to have that version of your child's plan within a month to 6 weeks, is what I would say. There isn't a time scale on it, and as it's not a legal document, we can't say otherwise, but you should have it back within a more timely fashion so that you can actually put your comments in. The other thing I would say about that as well is that a child's comments, I've seen a lot of plans where child's too young to comment. Child's not too young to comment. There's lots of different ways you can actually get that child's understanding of what the help that they're actually getting and how they feel about that. That can be in a wee video blog on your phone. It can be a letter that they've written. It can be a picture that they've drawn. It can be through talking mats and a picture taken of that and put on in there so that they know how they feel about school and things like that. Lots of different ways that you can. Okay, yes, for a 6-month-old baby, you're not going to get their understanding of it. But, when you get to nursery age, you should be able to get that child's understanding of what's happening. The other thing that I would say to you as well is that the ASN level 1 to 4, that's a really difficult one because actually a lot of parents and a lot of professionals can get a bit mixed up with the staged approach that's within the legislation that talks about the level of support that a child can have. That's completely different to the ESN level that a child will have. And I have in my sticky mitts, and I didn't put them out on the table purposely, I've actually got a copy of the Highland Council's Care and Learning Service levels of additional support needs. Information on what that level 1 to 4 should be and look like and what the child's needs should be. So I will put them out. I just didn't want you reading through them before I started. So my lovely assistant is going to come. I've only got 10 copies, unfortunately, but I'll let you. It means that you can actually have a read of them. And my lovely assistant will come round and put them out for me as well. Anytime that you get your child's plan, make sure that the information that's actually in the plan actually is relevant and up to date as well, because that's the one thing that I will talk about towards the end, is when an actual child's plan is actually reviewed and can be reviewed on a yearly basis, is there's certain criteria that you look for, and actually having relevant information, relevant and up-to-date information in the child's plan is essential. If you think about data protection, things have got to be relevant and up to date. Why does this child need a plan? What I would say to you is that does not need to be 4 pages long. If your child has autism and struggles emotionally and socially within school, which gives rise to their additional support needs to be put in place, that's really all that needs to be in there. Because at the end of the day, we don't need War and Peace in that bit, because the rest of the plan's going to give us that information. Somebody reading through it doesn't want to go and then go, oh, Craig, I can't be bothered reading the rest of the plan now. It needs to be short, sharp and concise. Obviously, we've got that side, the side of things that we don't really need to go through, people living at home, dates of birth and things like that, and also those other significant people. So if your child goes to granny's every day after school because you're working or whatever, then it means then that person should be put down there as well, because they'll have information, or the childminder, for example, too, or after school club can be put down there as well, because there are other significant people involved in your child's life, especially if you have a good understanding of your child's needs. It's always great to have them. Chronology. This is a slight change from your old child's plans. The chronology is at the very beginning. The chronology is one of these things that I've read chronology, which again could be 6 pages long. Doesn't need to be 6 pages long. We're looking for significant life events. So child being born, when they were born, their date of birth, that should be in it because it's a significant event. They've been born. And also, as well as, not every partner to the plan needs to have a copy of that chronology, because there may well be things in there that actually you don't really want. For example, the occupational therapist doesn't actually really need to know that piece of information. So they don't have to get a copy of that as well. The assessment should always be the people who are actually at the planning meeting at that time. So be yourself, the teacher, whoever else is involved. Also, as well as when you are actually having a meeting, have a think about who's exactly you would like to be there. Because sometimes we don't need to have the school nurse there. If actually everything's all right where that's concerned, they're going to the toilet themselves, they're brushing the teeth most of the time, they're sleeping all right. But that side of things is being coped with. Their immunisations are up to date. So generally, in health-wise, they're fine. School nurse doesn't need to necessarily be at that meeting unless she's either got something to bring to it or actually you're needing a referral to her for whatever reason. It could be the fact that actually you think that the educational psychologist needs to be involved. Again, that person doesn't need to necessarily be at that meeting that particular day. But if you want them to be there, then there's no reason. You would need to put your reasons as to why you want them to be there as well within that request for your child's plan meeting. There may well be, so for example, I spoke at the beginning there about, say for example, there's a positive relationship plan there, or there's, for example, there's a healthcare plan for your child because maybe your child is diabetic as well as having another condition, then that would be put in there in that second box for the additional specialist assessments and protocols. But also as well as by the time you've got to that child's plan meeting, the one previous, there was going to be an educational psychology assessment of your child, and that should be put in place in there as well to say that that's actually taken place. My World Triangle, I love it. I think it's a great tool. I think for parents and carers as well, it's a great tool because you know your child the best. You're the one that's wiped their nose. You're the one that's been up at 4 o'clock in the morning because they've been sick all over the bed. You're the one that's gone through the meltdowns. You're the one that's tried to reassure them time and time again at 2 o'clock in the morning because they think that Isabella doesn't like them at school. You know, you understand how your child ticks. And I would always say is to look through that and write your own strengths and pressures. I've helped parents write strengths and pressures. I've helped young people to come up with their own strengths and pressures because it's really important that they get that information that they're really good at some things. Yes, they struggle, and that's what we always end up concentrating on, which is right because we need that support to be correct for them. But actually, there's lots of things that they're really good at. If they're a creative writer, for example, what a great thing for them to be able to use when they come home from school stressed out their box is to go up and just go into their own little bubble and write a story, because that's what helps to calm them down. All those sorts of information are absolutely essential to have in that child's plan. I have gone through it with young people, and actually we've ended up writing more in the strengths than we have in the pressures, which is great. And for a young person or a child to see that visually, that we've actually got more than the other side, that's great. It's a real boost for them. It's great for their emotional well-being. Next slide, thank you. Analysis and in analysing the strengths and the pressures. So for example, I can't see it very well here, how will the risks be responded to? So, for example, if you've got a child who, as soon as they become overwhelmed, bolts out the door, then you would have that information in there that there would be a protocol for that. So that what do we do if Johnny decides that he's had enough of doing maths because he just can't get it, and he's going to bolt out the classroom, then there's got to be a process, a protocol in place for that as well. What are the long-term goals of the child? It's what do we ultimately want for that child or young person is what should be put in there. The action plan, you should go over when you go into your meeting the actions of the previous meeting, just to make sure if they may well have worked. They may well not really have worked, and we need to rethink things, but we need to go through them and actually look. But we also need to discuss other things that may have cropped up as well, that are actually the barriers to your child accessing a full-time education. And that's where the action plan for this plan would come into place. The next page, obviously, this is where as I said, where the child or young person's views and your views need to be documented, and as I say, that's when that becomes a final document, and you get the final document sent back to you, again, not the month before the meeting or the week before the meeting. It needs to be, again, it shouldn't really take them very long to copy and paste what you've put in an email, to be fair. What I would say as well is and this again comes back to the actual legislation where we talk about, with resolving disagreements, about open and honest communication between parents, carers and the authority, is that within this next box here, the note and explain any disagreements. If you disagree with something, don't be afraid to say so. You have the right to be able to, you have the right to say, I don't think that's going to work. Or I don't agree with what was agreed in the last plan because it's not right for my child, or what's in that plan, it's not right for my child. I don't think that's going to make any difference. So it is important that your views there, if there are any disagreements, it might be that mum and dad actually disagree. Mum thinks that it's going to work, dad doesn't. And that needs to be recorded as well. The contingency planning. Contingency planning in there is one of the boxes that probably is never really filled in. It does tend to sort of concentrate, I suppose, more on sort of looked after children, or children who are outside, who are being educated out with area. So if it doesn't work, what we're going to do. But also as well is that if you're at a meeting where, actually we've been talking about the same subject for 3 years now, it's not getting any better. That's where we need to talk about that contingency plan. Right? If this isn't going to work this time, what we're going to do next time? We need a plan B. And we should always have sort of in the back of our mind a plan B anyway, but it needs to be recorded on what you think that possibly could be. Coordinated support plan there, legal document within the actual legislation and within that plan as well. While that document is there, there is actually a separate document that needs to be filled in for paperwork and things like that for the Highland Council. So you should get all of the information within your child's plan, but you should actually get a copy of the actual coordinated support plan paperwork as well. Okay, and as I say, to request a CSP, you need to put that in writing to your additional support needs manager, and the contact details for those people are actually in that guide that you have in front of you as well. Compulsory measures, that section there is more for social work. So a lot of children will not have that section actually filled in at all. So don't expect that to be filled in on your plan. And what I would say to you is that even though the child's plan is not a legal document, actually, I think even though there are a lot of plans out there, Highland Council are the only council to have a multi-agency plan, which we are, in some respects, we are very lucky with. I know that people sitting around the room today, you will all have had different experiences. You will all have had things that will have worked and things that haven't worked, and things have gone completely and utterly the wrong way. And I get that. And at the end of the day, that's what I deal with on a daily basis in my job. I deal with mums and dads and grannies and granddads where it's not going right. But there are a lot of children out there where actually things are working too. I like the child's plan. I think it's great to have that information if it's written correctly and that the support is correct and right for your child. It should work very, very well. Child's plans, there used to be quite a lot of training going on with child's plan. Well, when Barry Forbes was here, that's obviously not as... she's not obviously in role anymore. Bernadette does do child plan training with head teachers and ASN teachers on a yearly basis. But also, as well as once a year, they will actually do an audit of certain child's plans to see whether or not they actually fit this criteria, because this is the criteria for a good child's plan. So, this is where I need to put the glasses on because I can't read it. So I have got copies of that as well. And my lovely assistant will hand them out. There should be enough for everybody to get one, actually. So you can have a read through that. You could probably go home, actually, today and score your own child's plan that you've got at home, if your child has one, with what that criteria actually is. One of the things that you will have noticed within the child's plan is it used to actually include the IEP information, and that has been taken out of the plan because not every child has an IEP. An IEP is used for educational targets, so that might be, for example, a child who has a difficulty with literacy or numeracy. It can be social interactions as well, so friendships and things like that too. But you usually find that a majority of the information should be in the actual action plan in section 4 of the new child's plan. But if your child does need one, there's no reason why you can't ask for one as well, for your child to have an IEP. There is information on the Highland Council website, which I know is a bit of a minefield to try and find stuff, but you can get information that you can actually read through all of the information on IEPs as well. So you can there are some out on the desk, so you can take them away too. So now that I've put you all to sleep, I'm going to wake you back up again, because I'm going to ask our lovely Catherine to come out just shortly to talk us through the My Rights, My Say service. I'd like to finish on a bit of a positive. Within the time that I've been at Chip Plus, and I absolutely love my job, there is not one day I think I really don't want to go to work today. I do. I love my job. I love doing this side of things. I love working with lovely people like Alison and Catherine. I'm very, very fortunate. And I would say that this is something that we feel in Chip Plus that we do. We do help to reduce isolation. Events like this, getting you all together, there's nothing nicer than being able to speak to somebody and have a coffee with somebody who actually knows what you're talking about and knows how you feel. Having that support is amazing. Talking to me on the phone or Catherine on the phone and me going, yeah, totally understand where you're coming from. Just to feel that I'm not the only one can be a massive, massive help for you to move forward. We hope to improve family lives. We hope that with giving you that support that actually together at home with your young person is that it makes a difference so that you actually can enjoy life as a family more. We give you more knowledge, hopefully, with the information packs, with the events that we do with Alison, with signposting you to other organisations, because we're not the experts. And I'm not going to pretend to be an expert in any shape or form. There are other people out there who actually will give you far more in-depth information that you need than I can. We help, hopefully, to increase resilience in families as well. Help you to be able to take things forward or feel empowered enough to take things forward yourself. That you have those rights to be able to do that for your child or young person as well. Hopefully we relieve the pressure on statutory services and resources so that it means that you're not getting more frustrated phoning that one professional that you want to speak to 10 times, or you have phoned round every professional that's on your child's plan, partners to the plan, and have got nobody, and then you phone us and you get to speak to us. So hopefully that helps to relieve that pressure and gives you that independent person to listen. And as I say, hopefully we help to improve relationships between parent, carers and professionals. We're not an advocacy service. We're possibly with a very little A. We're not a mediation service. But hopefully actually having that conversation and helping to point you in the right direction helps. It means that you can actually take things forward with professionals, and that helps to build that relationship up again. Because there's nothing more lonely than a parent who feels as though they're not getting a lot from those professional people as well. And if you want to get involved, there's some links there. But I would just like to thank you for listening to me whittle on for quite some time now. And I'm going to hand over to Catherine, who's going to come out and let you know about the My Rights, My Say. Thank you very much for your time today, everyone.